On behalf of the School of Architecture and Planning, we're so happy to be here for the 2018 Jaga Meem lecture, Snøhetta Topographies by Michello Delk. Meem celebrated and interpreted vernacular traditions here in New Mexico and used regionalism as a driving force in his work. He was able to respond to a broad range of clients' needs while reconciling the traditional forms of Southwestern architecture with elements of modernism. This holistic vision has contributed to the profound sense of place that the Southwest's built environment conveys to many observers, and how its regionally inspired buildings reflect its landscape and history. Now, on the cutting edge of international design, Snøhetta's work also clearly embodies a contemporary embrace of locality and is a testament to collaboration and the persistent importance of public space. Michello Delk is the Director of Landscape Architecture at Snøhetta and is based in the New York office. As a person who is deeply invested in the public realm, her work is transdisciplinary, evocative, and dynamic. Her work is representative of a foundational premise of Snøhetta: to create places that enhance the positive relationships between people and their environments. It capitalizes on the improvised, the eclectic, and the unusual in order to blur the distinction between architecture and landscape. She notes careful restraint and thinking about editing, framing, and episodic experience is very relevant. We don't want to wipe out what is here, but we wish, through careful editing, to create new places for people to inhabit. We wish to think about the ephemeral qualities so inherently beautiful, and how we can bring those qualities into a design that connects people to the history, water, and essence of this place. In the past 17 years of practice, 5 of which are at Snøhetta, Michello has produced an impressive body of work, from the small scale to the large, with an emphasis on the public realm. Currently, she is leading several diverse projects, including the design of the Willamette Falls Riverwalk in Oregon, the Blaisdell Center Master Plan in Honolulu, and the reimagined design of a privately owned public space in Midtown Manhattan. She is an active board member for the Urban Design Forum in New York City, and is often invited as a speaker at conferences, universities, and communities throughout the world. Informed by these various commitments, she seeks to discover and expand the urban landscape vernacular, furthering positive dialogue between our current and future urban vision. Snøhetta began as a collaborative architectural and landscape workshop that has remained true to its transdisciplinary way of thinking, which I know you will see in the work represented in this lecture by Michello. Please join me in welcoming Michello Delk. Oh, okay, number 3, right? Oh, yes. Sorry. That's what I learned earlier. Okay. Perfect. I don't want to yell at you, so I'm going to use this. Happy Friday, everybody. I'm so excited to see you all, and I have been saying all day, like, Friday afternoon, who wants to come listen to me? So thank you for coming, and I'm so happy to have the chance to talk a little bit about Snøhetta, the way we work, the way we think. And since the mountain on the screen behind me is almost life-size, I guess I'll start with that. We're named not after a group of individuals or an individual, but after a mountain in Norway. We often get together and climb that mountain. And this all started in 1989 when our firm was founded, after a group of young architects and landscape architects came together and they entered into a blind competition for what ultimately became this building, a new library in Alexandria, Egypt. And it was at that time that the foundation of how we work and how we think was really established. Today that's brought forward into several offices around the world, where we see ourselves as very much connected by our way of working and by our culture. We embrace the many diverse backgrounds of people who come from a variety of places and have various interests, and we see this as really an important part of a collective design thinking that really we embrace and bring into our work and way of working together. We have multiple disciplines
in all of our offices. In New York City, we have around 60 people today, and we have architects, landscape architects, interior architects, graphics and branding designers, administrators, a variety of people with a variety of backgrounds. We consider ourselves a transdisciplinary practice, and what that means, in essence, is that we encourage all of these disciplines to come together and for people to work together around a table and actually remove those distinctions, because ideas can come from anyone and everyone. It doesn't matter if you're an intern or a partner. It's about generating and collaborating to find the best way forward. All of our offices have spaces like this. Oh, it's a video. Hold on. Maybe it's not a video. It worked earlier. What did we do? Let me try this. Oh, makes me sad. Okay, well, just pretend like people are moving around a lot. All of our offices have spaces like this that are social spaces where we come together, and not only do we have lunch together often or just come together casually to talk, but we work around the table. We invite collaborators and clients to draw with us and create with us. We work not only through drawing or creating digital models, but we believe very much that design comes from not only our minds, but our bodies. So we build study models, we create prototypes, and we come together to talk about what we're thinking about and what we see in those, both from a pragmatic and functional sense, but we also ask people to discuss their emotional or intuitive responses. And we like to have fun and laugh together. We believe very much that we should enjoy what we're doing. We use abstract activities like card games such as this, and we engage our clients to think with us and explore ideas. The idea is that we can come together and form a common language around values and goals for the projects we're working on, and we encourage people to not use architectural jargon, but to form a set of ideas together that we can embrace and become the drivers for the work as we carry it forward. And we believe that this kind of integrated thinking really promotes integrated places, such as the Oslo or the Norwegian Opera and Ballet in Oslo, that not only is a great institution today, but invites people to explore this roofscape that is also a landscape. It's become a civic heart of the city and allows people to engage with each other and with the environment around them. We observe human behaviors, simple things like how people sit or how they move through space, how they engage with each other. And when the city of New York decided to close Broadway between 42nd and 47th streets, we were asked to rethink Times Square and transform it from a car-centric place to a people-centric place. We recognized that observing these behaviors could inspire design solutions, really simple things like removing barriers, reducing curbs, unifying pavements, and designing the sequence of benches that have different forms and shapes that allow eddies to form for people to gather, while also keeping zones clear for easy movement through the space. Both things that were very difficult before this transformation. And that small changes, like just getting a few inches higher in a space, draws people to gain a different perspective that's very beneficial. Ultimately, with the hope that we can invite diversity and create places that are safe and inviting to people. We also believe that often very simple solutions can have the greatest impact, such as the Norwegian Wild Reindeer Pavilion, which invites people who are hiking through the area to come in, to gather, to find warmth, and to connect with each other and with the environment around them. Because as designers, we look for opportunities to offer more than what we are asked for. We believe that generosity helps to offer greater value, improve productivity, and invite potential for happiness. It's sometimes useful to look back to understand where we're going. So I thought this afternoon, we might go way back to my childhood in northern rural Iowa, where I realized that the time that I spent exploring the landscape, building and shaping the lands, really helped to expand my imagination and began to generate a strong connection to the landscape around me. I've always had an appreciation and curiosity for the unusual, and my mother never fails to remind me how annoying I was and still am, because I insist that anytime we pass by this small park that I get out of the car and I climb to the top of this glacial erratic. She doesn't use glacial erratic, she calls it my rock. All throughout school and into my undergraduate studies, I was interested in art and was inspired by earthwork artists such as Robert Smithson and his work with the spiral jetty, where a careful interaction with nature reveals a subtlety in the ecology and the changing environment around us. Or projects like this, where Christo's running fence not only made legible this beautiful feature in the landscape, but I believe helps us to see the landscape that it sits within in a way that we may not recognize without its presence. I became quite interested in urban areas and social interaction that happens within those areas, and fascinated with the infrastructure that we build in order to create our cities. I recognized, finally, at some point, that the inspiration and influence of art on my life and the desire to explore and engage in the urban environment could actually be brought together through study in landscape architecture. So I went to graduate school at University of Colorado in Denver. I studied landscape as large-scale systems and began practicing, and have been doing so for quite a bit of time now. And it was really during practice that I learned and began to recognize the incredible potential that we have as landscape architects to positively impact the world around us. And this is not only through our design work, but it's how we engage with community, it's how we collaborate with other people, it's through people who teach and who talk and who come and have conversations. And there's nothing like seeing our efforts come to life. This was a few years ago on a construction site. I think I look like I like it. It's also important as professionals that we not only look back and reflect on our influences, but that we look forward to the future. And recent discussions amongst our peers recognize that there's a great importance to all of us to think about how we can improve social and ecological justice. And they summarize it quite well when they say that what we do to our landscapes, we ultimately do to ourselves. While I recognize the significance of this and very much believe that this is a fundamental consideration that we all have to look to for our future in practice, I also aspire to do a little bit more. I believe that what we do to ourselves, we ultimately also do to our landscapes. That we should embrace what inspires us so that we can offer more than functional, programmatic outcomes in our work, but that we can offer the opportunity to draw forward beauty and to offer inspiration to those around us. And thinking about this reminded me of this brief moment last summer when I joined my colleagues from my office out on the street in Lower Manhattan and many thousands of strangers all around us in an area that is normally full of people moving quickly to and from places that they're going. We went out on the street, and shortly before 2:44 p.m., we stood next to each other and we waited, looking up at the sky. Looking for this brief moment where something was about to happen that was so much bigger than us and so exciting to be a part of, that would bring us together, and that we shared this moment of absolute awe and beauty with not only our friends, but the strangers on the streets around us and with people across the country. And of course, there are many ways we can see or talk about or debate what beauty is. In our work, we strive to embody not only functional solutions, but we look for opportunities to offer inspiration, to offer more than what is asked from us. And there are many ways that we can do this in our work, but what I thought I might do this evening is talk about a few of our current projects that are in very early stages of design, where we're really exploring topography and the relationship, our physical relationship to the ground. So we'll start here on this site, not really all that far from here. This is in the Rocky Mountains in Colorado, just outside of Denver. And this is a historic gold mill that closed in 1943 that looks much the same today. Behind the mill is a 4.2-mile long tunnel that goes into the mountain that connected multiple gold mines and offered as a drainage way for moving water out of the mines. And a group of people came together and purchased this site a couple of years ago with the intention to not only retain the history and invite people in to continue to learn about that history. They operate tours in the mill. But they hope to appropriately develop this property around the mill to support new vitality in the community. The site itself is around 20 acres. It's almost vertical in topography. The mill and that rock pile to the right in this image are both historically designated, and the site is a Superfund site. So I know the client wouldn't mind if I say that they're maybe just a little bit crazy for entering into this idea, but they pride themselves on that kind of thinking. And we're in the early stages of visioning with them how to think about a future for this place. And we recognize the physical, cultural, and historic context that's embodied here. And we're beginning to think about how we can shape the material and character for the future. The development goals for this vertical site are ambitious, and we're imagining how we can work with the materials that are already here to inspire the architecture of the buildings and the landscape, to preserve and respect the identity of the mill and the rock pile, while thinking about new ways to inhabit this place that we hope can be both respectful as well as bold as the people who came here and first built this mill so long ago. We're also working right now in Midtown Manhattan, on the site in the lower center of this image, and this is one of many privately owned public spaces in Manhattan. And these spaces have a really important role in this environment because amongst such a dense area of development, these offer places for people to have respite and escape from the city and from that intense environment. And our site is this one. It sits behind the building on the left. And while it's a public space, it's an enclosed space that you have to enter through a door from the street to access. It's covered, it's narrow, it's underutilized, and I would say relatively uninviting to the public. We looked for inspiration simply in the area around us, and we recognized that the vitality and the drama of Midtown Manhattan, the almost canyon-like experience of moving down the streets amongst these incredible buildings and the vibrancy of the city, is not represented or embodied within this space today. And we also look to the history of Manhattan that you can see reflected if you visit Central Park today. The rock outcroppings of Manhattan schist that were so present across the Manhattan landscape prior to development of the island. And we began to imagine bringing these ideas into a new space that can transform this into a topographic garden that embodies both the functional aspects of what needs to happen here, and also becomes a place for people to explore. We were even able to think about reorienting the elevators inside the building lobby so that you will be able to look outside and see into this garden. And that we can invite people in from the street to ultimately transform this space into a garden that draws upon that context and history of Midtown Manhattan. We recently completed a master plan for this 30-acre site in downtown Honolulu. This is the cultural center of Hawaii, and everyone that you meet in this community will tell you a personal story, from attending their high school graduation, to their first concerts, or going to an event in the exhibit hall, such as Bait in Hawaii, where people bring their art and their creations to share with the community. And we were asked to come together to think about the future of this site that included renovating the theater building that's in the foreground of this image, and an arena which is in the background. It looks like the clamshell. But to also to renovate those facilities, to improve accessibility and create a long-term future for the venues. And we were also asked to consider replacing venues that were outdated and adding additional venues for a new program, as well as activating the landscape around the buildings to invite the public in. By talking with the community and visiting the site, we began to understand the deep connection and importance that they felt to these mid-century modern structures, and that they wanted to retain and continue to see those as the identity of this place. And we looked back a little bit further before the site was developed to a prior existence as a series of gardens and water that lived on the same site. So as we began to think about the renovation of the theater and the arena, and how we might begin to propose new program and new facilities for the site, we learned very early on by talking to the client group and to the people that manage and operate all of these facilities. They were key in helping us to understand that one of their biggest challenges today is the conflict between people visiting the site and the facilities with all of the service requirements and all of the circulation that has to happen to help this to function. And so what we realized is that if we were able to build a service core that connected all the facilities and created a separation between that service environment and the public environment, that we could make everybody's lives a little bit easier and a little bit better. So we proposed a back-of-house area that would ultimately be embodied by lifting the ground plane and reshaping the topography to connect all of the existing and new facilities below grade, that then would allow the landscape between and around the buildings to become an active public space. We began to think about how we would shape the architecture of the buildings and the land, and we looked to the formation of the islands. If you've been to Hawaii, it's quite simple. The presence of water and the power of water to shape the land in that environment is ever present. And we also looked to the cultural influence of water, the way in which people have lived and inhabited the islands. For example, the fish ponds that you see here that are part of the sustenance and life. So that allowed us to begin to see a site that's incredibly encumbered by asphalt and parking and service circulation today. By lifting that terrace area that you see here in yellow, all of these spaces between and around the buildings can become active public spaces where you're invited in from the street level to a new performance hall, a new exhibit hall, into a landscape of gardens and water. The elevated terrace itself could become an outdoor performance space. And the identity of this site and these institutions can be maintained, and we hope even enhanced. But the presence of the arena that you see here and the theater, which is in the background in this image, invite people in and maintain that connection and that invitation for everyone. We've been working for about 5 years now in Calgary on a new central library. This is an important new institution for the city that they hope to connect people to each other and to information and knowledge, to connect to the larger city, and to perform a variety of functions for the community. Before our team was even selected, the client group, the Calgary Municipal Land Corporation, along with the library, spent a couple of years talking to people about what they envisioned and what they looked for in the library. They did this in a variety of ways, some of which were surveys, which, while very well-intentioned and useful information for us to take into our design, and I did actually confirm there are dividers between the urinals, so this person should be happy. This kind of outreach doesn't necessarily capture all of the aspirations and hopes that people can have for an institution such as this that is so important to the community. So the client group reached out and engaged over 16,000 Calgarians through a variety of events and surveys and conversations to understand what the people of the community were looking for, because research is no substitute for talking to the people who live and work in these places, because they're the experts. We are never the experts. And what they found is that the existing library system really didn't have enough focus for engaging a variety of people, especially young people, and that became a fundamental driver for the design. We were invited to a design competition in 2013, and we partnered with a local architecture and landscape architecture firm in Calgary called Dialogue. And we began to work together to think about the site which the library would inhabit and the inspiration that we would draw from. And we learned about the landscape of Calgary and Alberta. It sits on this incredible seam between the aspen parkland and grasslands. And the climate is difficult to ignore. It's dramatic and powerful and part of the identity of this place. And we began to look for ways in which we could draw that into the design. And we were challenged to think about this site, which sits between the downtown of Calgary, next to the municipal building, which is to the left of this drawing, to the west, and to the east was a newly redeveloping area called the East Village. The site itself is bisected by a light rail line that comes into the site from the north at grade and begins to travel below grade as it passes through the site. So we were asked to think about where we would put the library on this site. The question we asked ourselves was, can this building do more? Can we find a way to inhabit this site with a new library and find a way to reduce the barrier that created in the community and create a sense of a node or a collection point? To do that, we recognized that the library couldn't have a single front, that we needed to think about the building as facing all sides, because all sides were equally important. So we started to explore the idea of lifting the library and placing the entrance at the center rather than an edge. And that rather than trying to fit it on one side or the other of this light rail line, we would simply place the building over top of the light rail. Simply. Because that's pretty easy. We started to do sketches where we imagined what this might look like and how we might expand the public realm and invite people in. And we saw this as a threshold, that the library itself could become a threshold to connect these two sides of the city and also draw you in and connect you into what the library has to offer. So rather than the light rail acting as a barrier, we started to imagine the building as creating a topographic land bridge that would literally lift you up and over so that you could pass through or into the library. And again, we placed the entrance at the center of this threshold and started to study a series of sloped walks and terraces and stairs that would bring you up and over. We had to get about 15 feet above street level to clear the encapsulation for the light rail. And I didn't want to bore you with bringing every single study, but I can't even tell you how many drawings we did trying to understand how to create circulation that would be accessible as well as inviting, that would not dominate the landscape, by stairs and ramps, but create places for people to inhabit. On the east side of the building, it was quite compressed, so we developed a series of stairs and planted areas and rely on a public elevator to lift you up to that plus 15. On the west side, where there was more generous space available, we created a series of spaces that people will be able to inhabit and explore, and a sense of compression that brings you up and over and into the library, so that not only is this a convergence and connection through, but also into the building. The circulation inside the building draws upon that same move, where an oculus in the center brings light down in and circulation moves around. A variety of spaces to learn and interact, where we have theaters that face out onto the street to draw people in. And as you move from street level up through the building, it transforms from a place that's vibrant and open and really public into quieter and quieter spaces for people to study or do their research. We thought a lot about how to make this passage open 24 hours so that you could pass through the building at any time, and how to create a sense of warmth and draw by considering the soffit of the building as a warm material that would connect us to the landscape. We use Western red cedar, which is a local wood that's resistant to rot and insects, long-lasting. And this is a recent construction photo that demonstrates, hopefully, the sensitivity of inviting you in. We had to think of a way to build a landscape that would get you up and over the encapsulation of the light rail without putting too much structural pressure on that, the light rail tunnel itself. So we built the landscape out of a lightweight material that creates the series of stairs and terraced areas covered in soil and vegetation to promote creating spaces for people to gather, a small amphitheater outside for people to come out and have readings, or for school groups to gather. Drawing upon the native landscape and indigenous plantings to bring that landscape into this area. And I can't tell you how much we had to fight just to use plants that we thought would survive, because the city pressured us that if this was going to be seen as a public space, it had to have lawn. So sometimes simple things are really hard to achieve. But it's being constructed this summer and has a variety of spaces that invite people to occupy this landscape in different ways, including a cafe that spills out from the inside. And the light rail itself simply passes through the building uninterrupted. So I hope this video will work. Ooh, it's working. The sound's not working. Oh, yeah, it is. So Kathy doesn't have to sing. That's good. I thought you might like to see this. This is a time lapse of the construction. The encapsulation of the light rail began during early phases of design. So as soon as we decided that this building was going to span over it, they began designing and documenting the tunnel. There were only 2 times during the construction of the tunnel that they shut the light rail down. So it ran 24 hours a day, other than 2 days, late night, when they shut it down, I believe for 2 hours. So it was a feat in and of itself. You can see, if you've been to Calgary, winter is pretty long and harsh, and you can see through this the construction continuing as much as possible. I like this part when the corners of the buildings are coming up. If only it happened this fast. 5 years, everyone, 5 years. I was on site 2 days ago. The landscape, the winter disrupted landscape progress a little bit, but I was on site. They've poured the foundations for the terrace walls and stairs. Some of the precast is in place. You can see it starting to take shape. And it was incredible to think about something that I started, even now, I mean, I've been doing this for a little while, started drawing this in 2013. So I can't tell you the joy of seeing this come together. It opens in November of this year. You should all come. How many of you have been to Calgary? Oh yeah! All right, November. You can start to see in a second the form as they start to, they're showing foundations in the foreground. You can see some of the planters and the foam shows up magically in a second. Oh, there it is. Okay, so that's a little bit of about how we got from this site to, one day, very, very soon, what will be this new library. I have one more project I want to share with you, but I need a drink of water. And I forgot to do it, but I didn't do it today. So, last summer we completed a concept design for the Willamette Falls River Walk in Oregon City, which is just south of Portland, Oregon. This is home to the second largest waterfall by volume in all of North America. It's here on the bottom right of this 22-acre site, which has been an industrial site for over 150 years, which has meant that during that time there's been little to no public access to the riverfront or to the falls. In 2011, when the Blue Heron Paper Mill closed, 4 public agencies had the foresight to come together and form a partnership and to work with the new landowner who had purchased the property out of bankruptcy. They agreed together to work with 4 confederated tribes who have ties to this area and with Portland General Electric, who continues to operate a hydroelectric dam on site. They invited our team to a competition where we were ultimately selected to work with them to imagine redevelopment of this site that would also promote public access back to the water. Prior to our work, they established with the community 4 core values that became the drivers for the design and really established a way of thinking about the transformation of the site. We began working together to understand the complexity of the site and began investigating and studying and testing ideas. And we had a series of several community events as well as online outreach and surveys and a variety of talks. Oregon City has about 30,000 residents, and we had multiple events that had anywhere from 600 to 800 people come to each event. This is how important to the broader community this transformation is. And we worked with them using similar games that I showed you at the beginning, abstract card games and engagement, to talk with people about the kinds of experiences, activities, and qualities of space that they wanted to see here. And they helped us to carry forward the 4 core values into key uses that would start to drive the activities on the site. And while some of these are very common and kind of easy to predict, there were some that were really quite interesting, such as recognizing the presence of PGE, the electric company, and not turning our backs to the operations of this existing industrial activity, but embracing that as a part of the future for this place. We agreed very early on on a couple simple ideas. Riverwalk was maybe not a great name, that this shouldn't be a path that exists between the river and the development, but it should be a series of episodic spaces that moves in and out and weaves in development and a variety of experiences. And that this shouldn't just be along the horizontal, but also the vertical, that instead of walking across the surface, this is an incredible, complex landscape that's 3-dimensional, composed of buildings and structures and geology, and that the Riverwalk should move up and down and weave in and out and take advantage and occupy a variety of spaces. Our design approach was to try to transform this complex site while retaining the sense of while accepting and retaining the sense of intrigue and mystery that you find when you visit this place. by thinking about a simple strategy to restore what's here, to carefully edit, to minimally add, and repurpose what we could to help to maintain that intrigue and invite people in. We took our time and we were very patient. We intensively explored. We climbed up, around, and under this site, looking for ways in which we could imagine a way to peel back the layers, to see buildings as both public spaces and development in the future, to imagine existing structures as new access points to the river, to re-envision historic tail races that were part of the industry as restored alcove habitat, to essentially edit to reveal what we believe is already here. By never seeing this as a clean slate, that we should simply wipe away everything that exists, and working with the community, we were able to imagine engaging spaces that could become a part of a vibrant community. And we peeled back the layers not only on the surface, but by looking at some of these existing structures and simply removing facades and stabilizing structures, we could bring people in to experience the history and the stories that are already embodied here. We could occupy the three-dimensional landscape and offer a variety of experiences and places for people to explore. We hope to reintroduce some elements, such as here, this grove of trees that was once the lumber mill, because we kind of have a sense of humor too. And we worked really closely with PGE to truly understand their operational needs, how they maintain and access the dam, so that we were able to see how we could reinterpret existing features that respect and reveal the past and the present activities. That when PGE needs to close the walkway across the surface of the dam for maintenance, we could have a series of secondary paths and spaces that allow you to reach that closest point to the falls. That we could harness the draw and the power of the falls to translate those four core values and engage all five senses throughout this entire experience. That you would hear the sound of the falls, you could feel the mist on your skin, you could dip your toes in the water, see a beautiful view, or see the dance of light and shadow. Ultimately, what we hope is that we can retain a sense of wonder and inspiration that this site already embodies. So thank you so much for your time.
So we have a few minutes for questions if anyone has any.
I'm very interested in your visual card and how you describe using that to include your clients in the decision-making process and extracting from them their emotional responses. Do you assemble decks for every new set of client, or do you sort of recycle through the images, showing them plants or animals or whatever?
I'm going to yell. Can everyone hear me? Okay. We basically use the same set of cards for most conversations because we selected them to be somewhat abstract, and that it's not about like a series of architectural images or landscape images. We do sometimes narrow down certain ones to cater to the conversation, but essentially it's really intended to just see what people think when they see them, and we will do it in groups sometimes. So we might have, if it's not like a 800-person engagement, we'll have groups of maybe 5 or 6 people, and we'll say pick 3 cards that embody something that you think is positive, that you like, that you want to capture in this project, and pick 3 that you don't like. And they kind of negotiate amongst themselves. And oftentimes, one group picks a card and they love it, and another group picks the same card and they really dislike it. And what we do is we get them to talk about why. What are they seeing? What does it embody? Not I like light, or I don't like industrial materials, but but what is it about it that you're attracted to or that you dislike? And through those conversations, we actually start to like get a depth of understanding that we haven't found really a better way to do. I can also share really quickly, because this was kind of fun. About a couple years ago now, our firm was invited to the competition for the Obama Presidential Library. And so my partners played that game with President Obama and Michelle. And they did really well, except when they said the rules, when they said you could pick 3 you like and 3 you don't like. Obama apparently was like, I'll pick however many I want. Other than that, they did very well.
When and if you ever actually get to a unifying concept of or a party, what's your process?
Well, that's not an easy question for a Friday afternoon. I think a couple things to know are that we do very much embrace this charrette workshop methodology, and we work, especially at early phases of the project, to bring people together. And it's really just about like, there will have been research and some prep work done, but it's about just generating ideas and talking and exploring. It's not as if that's the only way we work. So it's not as if we just continue to sit as like a group of 20 people around the table and try to find a way forward. We come together and then we go and we study things and we come back together. And so the process tends to be that ebb and flow, and you begin to kind of hone in and get more and more detail. I think, as anyone who has, been in practice, there's a lot of factors that we have to take into play. So there are people within our teams that have experience in leadership and are understanding the client and the context and those conversations. And we often have really complex client groups where, like Willamette Falls, where it's multiple agencies and a different landowner and all these different people. So there's a group that's kind of understanding and framing the parameters that then are used to then open it back up for exploration.
Got it.
Easy.
Yeah.
Michelle, I'm interested in a couple of things. One, the project you showed very early, the AT, what I call the AT&T building.
Yeah.
Philip Johnson's pride that the architectural preservationists
Yes.
had some objection. I like what you're doing.
Oh, thanks.
But how do you deal with the psychology or the politics of dissent in your design?
Well, I don't know how familiar everyone is with that particular example, which has been really, really contentious.
Not at all.
I think we strive very much to listen very carefully to everyone around us, to understand a variety of perspectives, but we also believe we have something to offer, that we have ideas that are worth hearing. So it's a very delicate balance of hearing many different points of view and ideas, and bringing forward something that we believe in and are committed to. So, as I said a little bit ago, we try to have a lot of patience and take a lot of time to absorb and understand. But at some point, we all are designers, and we have to have a perspective that we put forward. Otherwise, I don't think we're doing what we're being asked to do. In that example, the influence of that feedback and the community's commitment and outspokenness dramatically transformed the direction the design has gone. And in large part, that's not only coming from us, but it's coming from the client group. That we all, as I'm sure you know, we aren't working autonomously, right? We're working with clients and through approval processes that we can stand up and fight for what we believe in, but we have to do that in a context where we can achieve the goals of the broader group. In this case, the client's really directing how that's evolving.
I didn't know what the early plans were. What changed in your plan?
Oh, well, the transformation of the facade is extremely different. In fact, there hasn't been much conversation about the public space that I showed. That's not been out in the, it's not as far in design, it hasn't been in the public as much, so we actually don't know how people will react to that yet. So, I'll let you know. But for the facade of the building, it's dramatically changed how much how much change will take place.
I have another question.
Okay.
You mentioned competitions a couple of times. Our students, particularly the landscape students, are typically engaged in competition, but they're open competitions. Does your firm still do open competitions or only invited ones? And how do you decide which ones you will do?
We do both. We have, let me think. We don't probably do as many open competitions as we did when we were starting out, of course. But we are sometimes invited to competitions where it's through a qualification process. It's narrowed down. So actually, from what I showed you, the library in Calgary and the Willamette Falls were both open calls. Maybe we were invited to Calgary even. Sometimes you're invited even for the call. I can't quite remember. I know for Willamette Falls it was just open call. Teams formed and submitted their qualifications. In Willamette Falls they selected 3 teams to then do the competition. And in Calgary I think there were 5 or 6 teams that did the competition. And then we were selected out of that process to move forward. We do sometimes, when there's a competition that's out there that no one has necessarily contacted us, we do sometimes pursue those if it's a particular interest or opportunity that we want to try. Or sometimes, we almost always collaborate with local partners because we're working in so many places. So oftentimes a local partner may call us and ask us to join their team. Did I answer your question? Yeah, both.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about your how you collaborate between the different disciplines like landscape and architecture, and sometimes you exchange instruments?
Exchange what?
Instruments.
Oh. Yeah, well, I like how you say that. I'd love to talk about that, yeah, sure. To me, one of the biggest significant aspects of that for us at Snøhetta, which is different from my experience prior to Snøhetta. I don't know how it is in other firms, but there are a lot of firms that that have many disciplines within their offices. What I can say about us is that we genuinely place the value of bringing everybody to the table at the beginning, and we don't have one discipline lead and another one come in later and add their thoughts. That's the biggest distinction that I see. So for the Calgary Library, it was right after I joined Snøhetta that we did that competition. And I genuinely believe that if we hadn't had multiple disciplines at the table, we wouldn't have found the solution that we found that engages with the urban environment and achieves the goals of the library. I believe it would have been different. And so it's so important at the beginning, and while we try to curate those conversations by inviting people that have different disciplines or backgrounds, once we're at the table, it's not like, oh, Michelle, you're not an architect, you can't talk about the facade. We all can offer our ideas and thoughts. And in fact, as a landscape architect coming into the practice, it was really fascinating to suddenly have not only have the opportunity to, but need to intelligently speak about things that I actually really have never been asked to talk about. So it's very important at the beginning. It continues through our process that we're working together. But at some point, I also think it's important to acknowledge that our different disciplines do have different sets of knowledge base, and we all choose one for a reason. We want to dive deep into the one that we choose. And so we also rely on the expertise of people coming from different disciplines. We don't sort of pretend to know what we don't know either.
Thank you so much for being with us this evening.
Yes. Thank you.